Welcome to the Gradually Well podcast. This is your host, Mariah Chante. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. I am grateful that you decided to tune in. It is September, which means next month is the 1 year anniversary of the show. I can't believe it's coming up on a year already. Time has honestly gone by really fast. And because it's been a year, I want to do a giveaway or something special to really thank you for listening and supporting as I figure this podcasting thing out, figure out what works, the schedule, the style, all of it. So thank you for sticking with me or joining at any point. I really appreciate every second that you have listened to the show. I'm still figuring out what I should do as a 1 year kind of thank you. So if you have any ideas that you think would be a good one or that you've heard other podcasters do, let me know. Feel free to share your ideas. The best way to reach me would be through Instagram. Just shoot me a DM. My handle is at It's Mariah Chante. Of course, I'll have it linked in the show notes for you to look at. But yeah, share your ideas. Help me think of something good. And just because the first anniversary is coming up, it reminds me of the very first episode that I shared on this show, which was my story of being diagnosed with general anxiety disorder and how learning how to live with anxiety is what honestly triggered my journey of figuring out what living well looked like for me specifically. And going on that journey has taught me that my well-being or my wellness is affected by all the different areas of my life, which is why I choose to focus on the 8 dimensions of wellness in this show. I talk about occupational, emotional, environmental, social, spiritual, financial, intellectual, and physical wellness because they actually all affect each other. And I have just come to learn that personally. So I really want to share that information with others as well because it's a game changer once you realize that. And it's honestly knowing that helps me come back to myself when I find myself like venturing off path or going back to my anxious thoughts and ways. So just having that information and having open discussions really helps me out. So I just want to be able to share that with you all. And it has been my mission to share that taking the time to work on your well-being can help you find that peace of mind that you're looking for and give you that energy that you need to thrive in this life. For me, it all started with focusing on my physical health. You know, a diagnosis made me pause and look at other parts of my life. That's how it starts for a lot of people. You know, there's 8 dimensions of wellness, and while they all relate, usually there's one dimension or area that's requiring a lot of our attention or something's really going wrong with that. For me, it was physical, then the diagnosis, and I really honed in there. And I kind of over time learned and saw how much they related. It could be different for you. There could be a different area of your life that you need to start with. But the conclusion ultimately is the same, is that one thing affects the other. So anyway, in today's episode, Rochelle, a good friend of mine, shares her story of lessons that have helped her in her own wellness journey. And we talk about a lot of things. We hit a lot of really good points. We talk about mental health, your spiritual and emotional wellness, stigmas against going to therapy, and more. So I say all of that to say it's my hope that you are encouraged by something you hear today. Enjoy. Okay. Thank you so much for coming on today and welcome everybody to listening to our show, Gradually Well. Today is exciting. As you see, we have another interview, and our guest today is Rochelle Peterson-Ansari. And Rochelle is a speaker, a consultant, a trainer, and a coach. And she passionately fills the educational gap for young people, for their families, and those who serve them. But on top of all of that, Rochelle is the CEO of Perceptions Unlimited, an organization that offers both diversity and equity training. And through her work, Rochelle has been able to not only just help organizations and institutions, but countless people, and she helps them all transform. I've had the pleasure of knowing Rochelle for about 5 years, and I'm so grateful for our relationship. She has not only been someone that I've gotten the chance to work with, but also she's mentored me at times. But most of all, I value her as a friend. So thank you so much, Rochelle, for coming on and joining me today.
Oh, Mariah, thank you so much for inviting me. It is an honor to be here with you.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm glad. And I'm excited to talk with you, as always.
Yes, yes.
So I figured to help people get to know you a little bit more, I'll ask a couple quick questions. So there are 8 dimensions of wellness. I talk about them on my podcast, and I'll read them to you because eight's a lot to remember. But
Mhm.
I want you to choose which one sticks out to you the most right now, or which one do you like the most right now, and we'll talk about maybe why that resonates with you.
Okay.
So the 8 dimensions are career, family, friends, romance, your environment or space, finances, emotions, and spirituality. So, which
Okay.
one do you either is most interesting or kind of sticks out to you right now in your life?
Just one.
You can do two.
I would say spiritual,
Okay.
and I would say that it's connected to emotional.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So those two are really standing out, like
Hmm.
standing out to you right now.
Hmm. Yeah.
And you say connected to emotional, just like they're really intertwined, or what do you mean?
Yes, and maybe it's for me in terms of my spiritual growth as I have grown spiritually. I've grown in my emotional intelligence, if you will.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, there is that deep connection that what you're saying right now kinda reminds me that, both spiritual and emotional work can be, are very big internal places of work for each
Mhm.
person, and I relate to that. I definitely think if it were not for my spiritual life, I would not emotionally be as well as I have gotten to, right now, you know?
Yes, yes, I agree. And I think all of the other areas work better in my life
Mhm.
when I worked on both of those areas.
Wow,
You'll
okay,
it
yeah.
really you'll hear probably in every answer that I give you the how I became gradually well
Mhm. Mhm.
is centered in my spiritual development.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And
And
then mhm.
oh, go ahead, keep going,
And
I'm sorry.
then all of the other areas, I would say a top area, uh, another area of wellness was around emotional wellness
Mhm.
and everything else. You mentioned career, family, friends, finances, etc., fell into place.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. So this is why I had you come on because one of the things that I talk about is that all the dimensions are intertwined. And
Hmm.
even with coaching people, we start usually with one area, but sooner or later, people see that they all affect, they intertwine.
That's
If
right.
you are spiritually better, you're going to be maybe better in your friendships and family life and career and
Hmm.
all these things. They really do intertwine. So
Hmm.
it's really cool when you can begin to see that and feel that for yourself. And
Yeah.
I like to ask this question because, I think it does show us it helps us gain other people's perspectives, of course, of what's important to them. Not that all the areas aren't important,
Mhm.
but typically people use these different dimensions to kind of center themselves. So I wonder is when you feel off centered, do you tend to go back to focusing on your spiritual life to help you get back on track?
Well, there are two things. So there is a physical dimension to that for me.
Hmm.
So in regard to my physical health,
Mm-hmm.
So I go two places, right? So when I feel off center, I, yes, my spiritual development is a key area that I focus on. And I also check in with myself around my health now, my
Mm-hmm.
physical health, because I was diagnosed with a chronic illness in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Man, okay, yeah, that's great. And I think like what you're saying here is also, I mean, an example of that. We learn as we go, and it's important to take the feedback that you have received and adjust. Because
Mm,
like you were saying, you learn to incorporate your physical to help you to
mhm,
check in with yourself physically when things aren't going as good as they could be.
mhm.
And so that's another example of this, like, they're all intertwined, and but
Right.
not necessarily just one thing has to be the answer. Like spirituality could be super important for you, and it's a foundation for a lot of people.
Yes.
I jump back to spirituality a lot in my life, but also you can't ignore or forget the other more practical thing. Not that spirituality isn't practical, but when you look at like health and wellness, people tend to think physical things
Right.
too, and that's one of the first things to get ignored. So it's,
Right.
just a testament that physical is just as important, and sometimes those practical things that we think of are what can help us get back to being centered and aligned with purpose and how we would like to show up in our lives.
Yes, indeed. And so when I think about purpose, right? Like purpose, I'm sorry. You said one of
Mhm,
my favorite words. So when I think about my spiritual check-in, right? So
mhm,
first of all, I check in daily,
mhm,
regardless of whether I feel centered or off centered. But what I
mhm.
have learned to practice over the just recently in the last 3 years was a check in throughout the day
Wow. Oh,
spiritually.
that's good.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I heard someone call them whisper prayers.
Oh, I like that.
Yes. And I wish I remembered it was a woman
Mhm.
said it. I would give her credit if I remembered her name. But
Uh-huh.
I think she might have even written a book
Wow.
about whisper prayers. Yes. That I had heard on a podcast some time ago.
Mhm,
And as I grew in my relationship with God, so I am Christian, that's my spiritual tradition. And so when I talk to God on a daily basis, I didn't necessarily, I guess, consciously talk to God like throughout the day, right?
mm.
And
Yeah.
when that concept of whisper prayers came to me, I heard it. I said, I think I'm going to try that, right, as
Yeah.
well. And that was after I started daily devotion, which for many years I did not do.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, um, knowing what I do now
Mhm,
and how it's different than what I did many years before that, I would
mhm.
say I didn't. At the time, years ago, I probably would have said, sure, I talk to God, I pray to God, all of that, but
Yeah.
it wasn't consistent.
Mhm.
And that's the difference. So, in that time, so when my feet hit the floor, that's the first thing that I do
Right. Oh, that's so
is,
good.
yes, thank the creator for giving me a day to
Mhm,
fulfill his purpose. And then I must have quiet time before the rest of the house gets up.
mhm.
My canine girl does not agree with me, but I find my space and really close her out because I'm very outwardly focused. So I will
Mhm.
pay attention to another living being and its needs. And if you know,
Right.
dogs, they like sit in your face and stare at you,
Yes.
right? And so I had to create a hack, right? And literally close spaces that no one else will get into. And I
Mhm,
get up before my partner in life gets
mhm.
up so that I can just really focus and be quiet.
Yeah.
And in that check-in, I am asking what's going on because
Mhm.
part of my spiritual tradition is to, I get my guidance from a spiritual leaning, right? And so a lot of Christians call that the Holy Spirit. And
Mhm.
so I'm learning to listen for those answers. And what I found is when I'm reading, I read some scripture every day. When
Mhm.
I'm reading in that scripture and have that request, like to help me see what's going on,
Mhm.
I get something.
Mm.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that helps me know that where the something is coming from. Because for many, many years I was like, I don't know if that's a negative force
Right.
or it is God, right?
Right.
Because, in my tradition they say that Satan or the devil hears your prayers too, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
and some things that look like opportunities are actually distractions.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I really had to learn to focus
Yeah.
in order for it to help me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned so many good things there. And like, well, one, it sounds like adopting this almost ritual of making sure you have the quiet time alone and just so really you can tune in
Hmm.
has provided you clarity
Yes.
on, God's voice and what you need, what is aligned with you. And
Hmm.
I mean, clarity brings so many things, right? Like
Uh-huh.
peace and just comfort and confidence and all the things.
Yes.
And so that's amazing to hear that. And then I just to touch on it a little bit, because when you were saying that, make sure you have the quiet time and you get up before your partner. Um, that's setting your environment. I like to talk about environment a lot because I know it's one of the dimensions of wellness. And yes, we do talk about like the outside environment, like the world and our planet and that
Hmm.
environment. That's extremely important as well. But I like to kind of hone in on the personal environment
Hmm.
in your space and how that can change throughout the day and even who's in your space when depending on what you're doing.
Yes.
I've had to really learn about that as well. Having a baby, he's 16 months now, and I'm like, I've really found the value in just waking up before him and removing myself from the same environment, because right now we still sleep in the same room, and I'm like, I will go to another room in the mornings and just have some quiet time, get me together. And I have a way better start when I do that versus when I don't.
Yes.
And it really affects how you show up for that day, for whatever
Mhm.
event, how you get started. So I think that was really great that you mention that, because environment is so crucial and it can affect everything. Like, I mean, even your spiritual life, your emotional, how your physical, like, so I'm
Mhm.
glad that you brought that up and just really painted the picture of how uh, important it is to have a good space and quietness so that you can focus and tune in so that you can show up for the rest of your day.
That's right. And another way to put that is really you use that time to fill your cup.
Yes.
Yes. So
Yeah.
that other people can get from your overflow.
Right.
That was
Right.
one of the lessons I had
Right.
to gradually learn.
Uh-huh. Because you can't pour from an empty cup. You really can't. You can try and try and try, and you
Mhm.
can, physically be present for the things that you're supposed to do,
Mhm.
but there's a difference when
That's right.
you're running on E, you
Yes.
know.
Or a half a tank.
Yes, yes, even a half a tank. That's so true.
And that's what I learned in some of my spiritual development was you need to be filled up. You don't give from a half a tank. So how do you
Mhm.
fill it every day? How do you fill it weekly? How do you fill it throughout the year? I
Right.
found that I knew I liked to travel. And
Mhm.
when I tell you, when that pandemic took it away,
Oh, yeah.
it
Yeah.
made me take a step back and think
Mhm.
about the fact that, yeah, like that was something that I like to do. I had actually adjusted how much I traveled after I got married,
Mhm.
and I decided I had to build that back in. That's looking at
Right.
my year. I
Right.
I ideally set a goal years ago that, oh, I want to go on 4 vacations a year, for at least a week.
Mhm.
Well, they now look like it might be a retreat for myself a week away,
Mhm.
but maybe just an hour down the road. I just need
Mhm.
that time with me.
Yeah.
I love travel. I love learning. I love learning about cultures. I started as a sociologist, so it's
Mhm.
in my blood. So when I travel, I like to be among the people, and I
Mhm.
do like to leave this country if possible, uh,
Right.
leave the US. And so that had to be built back in. That fills my cup in a different way. The
Mhm.
time alone fills my cup in a different way. And I was like, that's something I need. Uh,
Yeah.
and then of course I fill it daily in my spiritual development, and I would just say in my spiritual development mostly. I,
Right.
I'm filled up in some ways by the work I do because I feel like I'm doing the work that I was created to do.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
However, it involves things that I wasn't created to do. So that's not always, fulfilling
Right.
in the same way. So I still have to re energize, recalibrate
Mhm.
to fill the cup.
Yes. Yes. That's so good. And it just, I mean, it goes to show that, sometimes people feel so guilty and there's so much shame about
Mm,
taking time for yourself,
mhm,
or even enjoying yourself. Sometimes I know, even if nobody else has shamed me, maybe they had in the past, and that's why I took it on.
mm,
Because I believe shame is taught. Um, so I think that, like, I would feel guilty about, like, "Oh, I decided to do this and relax a little bit instead of working more." And I'm like, "I know I have a good work ethic. I know that I show up and everything."
mm,
But sometimes I saw a post the other day, I just remembered right now that it said, like, "You don't have to earn rest."
mm,
You don't have to earn it. And it's so
mm,
funny because I think people have blatantly been taught the opposite, you
mhm,
know, rest when you're done. This
mm.
hustle culture and stuff.
Yeah.
And I do, there is obviously value in completing things and discipline, but that does not mean that rest isn't valuable too.
Mhm.
Rest isn't important, as rest to me is part of the work.
Yes, it
you know?
is.
So it's great to see that you have learned to value that and not be shamed or for wanting that and incorporating that into your life, because it truly is valuable and it's part of filling your cup and
Yes,
in other ways than just the work that we do.
yes. And I don't want to be shamed about not remembering where my quote comes from. Uh,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, who is my person? Oh my goodness. So one of our ancestors
Mhm.
has shared that rest is resistance. I want to
Ooh.
attribute it to Audre Lorde, but it may be someone else. And rest is resistance. More and more
Wow.
people are saying that, especially since the pandemic, and
Mhm.
particularly when our people took our unrest to the streets
Yeah.
after George Floyd was murdered publicly.
Mhm.
Um, we talk about it more publicly, and
Mhm.
and I would say among people, my people are kind of all kinds of people, but among my people, Black people, I think we really need to reframe
Mhm.
what a lot of us who were born and raised in the US learned
Mhm.
from, the generational trauma of being, the descendants of people who were in chattel slavery in the
Yeah.
US.
Yes.
Somehow, and it's within US culture in general,
Mhm.
but what I've found, particularly among women, I'm not, I'm going to talk to the Black women out there.
Mhm.
Yes, no
Yeah.
matter whether you could be just African American, Jamaican, just Black women.
Black women. Mm-hmm.
We wear this busyness, this, being there for others before ourselves, like martyrs,
Yeah.
until it takes us out.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I have been in my friendship circles, in mentoring others, I probably have been in front of that, like in front of that learning curve, or on the top of that learning curve, uh, longer than
Mm-hmm.
many of my friends in my age bracket
Mm-hmm.
in particular, right? And those who were ahead of me, I previously saw as selfish.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So I got it to an extent
Right.
long before many of my other friends, and some of them still haven't gotten it. Um, and yeah, I'm going to say Black, and I have a lot of Puerto Rican friends among the Latinx, Latina
Mm-hmm.
community, who might not have it yet either. And I mean, we clearly got it from our parents. We clearly
Right.
got, and again, from the messaging that we received as Americans, that
Yeah.
work was first versus taking care of yourself.
Right.
Even though American culture teaches individualism, it's individualism, I think, for more of a materialistic
Yeah,
uh,
I see that. Mm-hmm.
purpose versus for self care,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you can have more things and bigger things and la la la, but it doesn't, we're not saying be individualistic and take care of yourself
Yeah. Yes.
before you do all of that work that's
Mm-hmm.
required to help someone else build their dreams.
Right. Right. Oh, Rochelle, that's so good. And you, like you said, it's rooted deep,
Mhm, mhm,
come from, our parents' generation and their parents' generation. And, it goes on and
mhm.
on. And you mentioned the term generational oh, I forgot if you said wealth or
Or because it's generational trauma, really.
generational trauma. And
Yeah.
that's brought about, I don't know if you've noticed it, but I see on social media a lot of people talking about, generationally healing and
Mhm,
we're fic- we're trying to do the work. And I do believe that, that parents generations, they did what they probably did better than what they were brought up as. I just think
yes.
that's a little bit human nature in us that we want better
Mhm.
than what the
The
people before
previous,
us did.
right.
So, but I am proud of like how we've gotten kind of like this permission to live out loud, have self care out loud, and
Mhm,
to do the work and really heal.
mhm.
And there's been communities built on that. Before I even remember um, therapy being taboo to talk about. And for some
Oh,
people, it still is, especially in
yes.
certain cultures. And I can
Mhm,
speak for certain Black cultures because that's what I'm part of. And
mhm.
I know sometimes I even still have conversations with people older than me, and it's like, oh no, they're like, okay, yeah, therapy's good, but not for me. I don't need
Right,
therapy.
right.
Mm-mm. Like I'm good. Or I've heard people say I'm too old for that. Like it is what it is. I am who I am. I'm like, well, be who you are, but like get heal, heal too.
Yes,
You can be the
yes,
healed version of you. You
yes,
know, so that
yes.
there's still plenty of stigma about
Yes, it
healing, about
is.
therapy, about the work. Um, but I
Yes.
am proud of the progress that we made, but there's still plenty of work in progress to be done.
Exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned that. Mental health
Hmm.
is so important, right? Our mental and our emotional health is so important. And that's why I say, my centering around my spiritual development actually helped me get those things in order,
Yeah.
right? And around the stigma itself. So when I went through perimenopause, menopause.
Mhm.
And I believe not enough of us talk about it. I was a little heated
Yeah.
when I had an experience. So I was around 45. I don't mind telling the world I'm 55. I'm here to tell a story. So,
Okay.
and so when I went through perimenopause, no, maybe I was like 47. So, because I was also 2 years into my marriage, and
Mhm.
this is my first ever marriage. So, you get the picture.
Mhm.
I was a grown woman, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Trying
Yeah.
to share space for the first time with someone else, and share a life that way, um, was character building. And
Right.
then perimenopause really hits. I could have been in it before that. I didn't experience any symptoms. What I did experience around that time was anxiety.
Mm.
It felt like it came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until a conversation, like in the throes of it, I was stuck in the parking lot. I couldn't get out. Like I couldn't figure out how to get out. And
Wow.
then that just took me to another space in my head, and then I was weeping, right? I
Mhm.
thought of the only person I could call was my cousin that wouldn't, give me just advice that would make me uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
or just listen. And she just happened to mention so many people on her job who were experiencing menopause and having different kinds of experiences. And and then that made some sense to me because I really
Mhm.
didn't know what was happening. Why was
Yeah.
I stuck in this parking lot? Right. And so I did call my GYN, had an appointment within a couple of days, and certainly she was like, yeah. And
Wow.
then I talked to two elders that same
Mhm.
week, telling them about the experience I had. And they went, oh, yeah. Let me tell you about. I said, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's common knowledge.
Right. So my mother did not experience anxiety that she remembers during
Mhm.
that stage of life, right? Perimenopause. So she didn't have that to give.
Yeah.
All I had ever heard of was the night sweats.
Right. Yeah. Now that you say that, yeah.
But I had what I think people would call a panic attack. And
Mhm.
then now I'm talking to elders who are now telling me the story. But
Wow.
you talk about, right, how we keep it to ourselves because there's a stigma around it. That's a mental health issue.
Yeah.
Yes. Even
Yes.
if it's temporary, it's a mental health issue.
Yeah.
And so it helped me then to know I'm not going crazy. That's exactly what I would have said, right?
Mhm.
And it helped to know that I wasn't the only one,
Mhm.
and that this was a normal part of the process. But at once we did have a name for what was going on for me. Fast forward to 2020, this is many years later,
Mhm.
when I'm asked by a medical professional about symptoms, they go down that route.
Mhm.
Like, could it be the anxiety that is coming back
Oh,
for her? And can we,
yes.
so that's the diagnosis. And then we prescribe medication for that,
Mhm.
instead of being open to other possibilities.
Yes.
Yes. And
Oh,
so,
yes.
yes. And so I just want to say this just in case we run out of time. At the
Mhm.
time that I actually, had went into diabetic range with my A1C during
Mhm.
the pandemic, that's what they thought first.
Wow, anxiety.
Well, and those were the questions the type of questions they were asking were going to confirm anxiety when it
Yeah.
actually wasn't.
Right.
And I knew better. I said, something's not right. This is different. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, this is different because I was experiencing issues with concentration. I mean, I couldn't match two things together. I was like, that's a little different
Mm-hmm.
than the
Yeah.
anxiety, right? But I'm just answering your questions. And with the best thing that they could give me or prescribe was the a medication for anxiety. I was like, okay, but I actually had a bad reaction to it because that's not what was going on.
Right.
Yeah. So just wanted to plug that in there. But back to the mental illness and or mental health and shame around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I had every possible influence in my life suggested not to get therapy,
Yeah.
right? Like people didn't say it out loud, like don't go, but I got
Right.
messaging that said, no, if you go get therapy, that's for the people with real
Real
big
crazy.
problems. Like,
They
right,
got issues.
right.
Right.
What you're experiencing doesn't require that.
Right.
But
Especially when you're still functioning pretty well, from an outsider's
otherwise,
perspective, or
right,
you're able to show up, but there is a
right,
such thing, not saying you had this as like, but functioning depression or
yes,
functioning anxiety and stuff
right,
like that.
right,
So
exactly. And I think I might have functioning anxiety uh,
mhm.
because at the time that we identified the anxiety around the time I was going through perimenopause, I could think back to other times, like many years before that, when friends would say to me, "Oh, every time you would say, 'Hey, let's go, grab a martini or something after work and just kind of sit and kind of unload,' it would be around the same time of year."
Mm.
And I
Wow.
thought there was some connection to periods of time when I had miscarriages. So I had, I had one. It was the first one nope, not the first one. The second one in September, like that month. And so
Mhm.
it was always around September, October, right? And if I wasn't
Wow.
busy, because I used to do work in higher ed, that, August to September, you were on and you
Right.
didn't have a break. And so it
Yeah.
wasn't until we began to slow down a little bit that I would rest and then start feeling really low, right?
Yeah.
Low
Yeah.
lows. So I thought maybe all of those years I might have been functioning with a level of anxiety,
Mhm.
right? Like abnormal anxiety, right?
Mhm.
Um, and didn't realize it
Right.
when I take a look back. And so a lot of people are functioning in that. But guess what? Because yes, y'all, I went and got therapy.
Yes.
We
Yes.
got therapy. And through therapy and also some of my own, again, in my spiritual development, having insights,
Yeah.
I realized that the anxiety that might have been running, that pops up, is heightened at certain times, was connected to a need for approval of others.
Wow. Oof. Mm.
It ran my workaholism.
Mhm.
I'm proud to say I'm recovered from
Yeah.
that. That's
Yes. Recovered.
yes, my
Mhm.
perfectionism. I will still
Mhm.
say I'm in recovery for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, from perfectionism, right? My mother used to say, oh, I'm a perfectionist. So I just thought it was, something to actually be
Right.
proud of.
Right. People say that. Yeah.
When someone said to me, perfection, I mean, just randomly, I was in a group conversation and they said to the group, the term perfectionism came up and they said, well, perfectionism is a sign of low self worth. I was like, well, what?
Ooh,
Like, will you
ooh, come again?
that you hear what I said? And did a little research on that because one thing I would say is I did not have low self worth,
Mm-hmm.
but when I started peeling away the onion, I did.
Yeah.
I did. I got my sense of worth from what I did, not who I am.
Not who you are.
And what I did, right, produced a product for other people
Mm-hmm.
all the time. The workaholism, when I look at that being connected, it's like, yes, you worked all the time because you wanted to show up as perfect, as on top of things, as doing all things um, above expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And
Yeah.
some of that, I'm sure, seeped into me from, like I said, family, right? The people around you really saying they value perfectionism, but also the impact of being in a racial group in the United States that's looked at as less than,
Mm-hmm.
some other racial groups, right? We are often, I know I received the message from a whole lot of influences, even outside of my household, that we had to work 2, 3, 10 times harder to even be seen.
Right. Yeah.
That probably contributed to the self worth issue as well.
Oh yeah. It's generationally passed on to us.
Right.
And it looks
And
different than what it did for our parents, so that's
yes, it did.
why I think it's sometimes easy to miss because we're like and, they'll say people will say that our generations before that, "Oh, well, you got it this way. I had to do they had to do, this,
So
that, the
much.
third a lot harder," and we're like,
Right.
"Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
grateful I'm not at that time." So we discount our
Right.
experience, right?
That's right.
Is it was what it come down to, where we
Uh-huh.
minimize and
Uh-huh.
minimize and minimize and people are saying how much value we add without checking in on the person,
On the person. That's right.
not the product.
That's right. And I don't know if this is for anybody else, but listen, when I say workaholism, and you may not have it this bad, I literally used to get up and the first thing I thought about was work.
Mm,
Like this was many, many years ago. I was younger. I did stop doing that. I know for sure 'cause I was living in, where I live now. For sure, I had stopped that by 2007. I can't tell you when exactly, but for many, many years, like in my early 20s, definitely throughout my 30s,
wow.
I used
Yeah.
to just think about work. And so it was like, yeah, so what was running in the background was just being, having approval of some outside force when all along you could have accepted that you are perfect in your imperfection, that
Yeah.
you are wonderfully made by your
Mhm.
creator, all of that time. I don't
Yeah.
wish it on my worst enemy
Mhm.
to have that. That's a saying, by the way. Like, you
Right,
don't
right,
wish it
right.
on your worst enemy to have that kind of experience in your 20s and 30s when you are your most vibrant self physically.
Mhm.
Man, what time wasted.
Yeah. You know, Rochelle, I could talk to you all day, of course. We know this. This is not new.
Right, right,
But,
right.
you're sharing so much, and I just wanna quickly recap because I know we're on time here.
Mhm,
But you've dropped so many gems from even the start. The first question, like with what sticks out to you, and we talked about spirituality and setting your environment and doing the things that you need to do so that you can focus and align with what is your purpose. And when I say purpose, I mean I have a whole
mhm,
episode on purpose with Rochelle actually, but I'll just briefly say if I had to sum it up, I don't want people to feel overwhelmed by the word purpose. You could have a purpose for a day, for a moment. What's your
mhm.
purpose in this moment? And that can be linked to greater purposes. But I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. I promise. Not right now. But anyway, just taking time to self reflect so you can be clear and get clear on what aligns with you and for you. And then also taking the time to um, be honest with yourself and do the work. And sometimes it's going to look different than what you've seen. Like when we were talking about therapy and Rochelle was sharing that, people were saying indirectly that don't go. And I know that people still struggle with that today. You may be around people that are like, oh, yeah, I went to therapy, but for whatever reason, you don't think it's for you or you've been told it's not for you. And um, a sidebar here that I know we're not saying that therapy is easy and it's just like you just go to one session and it's a fix, because everything's a process, y'all. But
Mhm.
and just like sometimes doctors, if you go to the doctor, you may not like one doctor. The same thing can apply to a therapist. A lot of therapists are doctors, but
Mhm.
so I just don't want to give you the impression that just go to therapy once and it's just this easy thing.
Right.
Part of a process, y'all. But
Mhm.
back to my original point that you may have to try things you've never tried before. And you're not going to learn how to be okay and confident in doing that unless you can get clear on your own thoughts and know what feels right in your body, what feels like where you are supposed to go.
Mhm.
Okay. So I mean, we've talked about so much here, right? And I just think this is so beneficial to people because you've given us so much insight and examples of how wellness and all these different dimensions they intertwine.
Mhm.
And you learn, the more you tune into these things, you can become a better advocate for yourself. Like Rochelle was saying, like, when she was at the doctor, she knew it wasn't her anxiety. And the healthcare system, we all know it needs work, okay? We that is not new to us. Um, and unfortunately, so many people don't get diagnosed properly or they're misdiagnosed because uh, yes, a broken system, but also we're not aware of what feels right in our own bodies. And
Yes.
so we need to get better at even just increasing our awareness. I'm a big advocate for increasing your
Mhm.
self-awareness. And you can start by just taking a quiet moment in the morning to process your thoughts. And then if you need help with that because thoughts can be overwhelming, you can get some help. Therapy, there's coaching, there's resources online, listening to people have conversations that I started by listening with podcasts, which is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it and decided to have my own, because just hearing other people share their stories has really made a profound impact on my life and my experience.
Yes.
Um, but like I said, okay, I could go all day, y'all, but I'm not. Okay. Before we wrap up here, Rochelle, I have I guess maybe a little bit of a challenge.
Okay.
And maybe one sentence or less. What does living well mean to you?
Mm. Living well means experiencing joy from the inside out.
Mm,
Living well means having balance, great boundaries, and being who we are created to be.
mhm. Wow, that's really good. You covered a lot in that sentence. I mean, you could do it.
You
Rochelle,
know,
we've
I
got
can talk, so I'm trying to be succinct.
that. I mean, that is so good. I mean, you cover a lot, I feel like, in that sentence. I mean, and
Mhm.
honestly, knowing me and you, we could have a whole nother episode for each part of
Yes.
those sentences:
Yeah.
joy, boundaries,
Mhm.
who you're created to be, all of
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Um, but again, thank you so much. Before I let you go here, where can people hear more from you and see more of
Yes.
you?
Wow. Yes. So I am on LinkedIn most of the time. So you can find us find me at Rochelle Peterson-Ansari, or you could just type in perceptions. and find me there. I'm there weekly, at least 3 times a week. And I'm also on Instagram. Well, myself and my company are on Instagram and Facebook at Perceptions Unlimited. That's all one word, and it's spelled out Perceptions, Perceptions, Unlimited, Unlimited. And our website is www. Now, this is a little different, so just make sure you tune in. So it's perceptionsunltd.com. So it's perceptionsunltd.com. And if you didn't notice, the UNLTD is basically the abbreviation of unlimited. So that's where you can find me. We're actually we're starting a media page, so there's podcast episodes there of interviews with me, and interviews also on LinkedIn.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'm going to make it even easier for y'all in case you're driving. I'll link the all of those links in the show notes, so that if you didn't get a chance to write it down or pull it up, you can just come back to this episode and click the link and it'll take you directly to those pages. I'll have a link for each of them.
Wonderful.
Well, again, thank you so, so much, Rochelle. I know I enjoyed this conversation, so I know somebody else had to. And I'll have to have her back, y'all,
Yeah,
because again, we could talk about so much for a while.
we
But I
could.
appreciate all the wisdom and vulnerability that you shared here today. It is so, so, so appreciated.
I really appreciate the opportunity to share. I do diversity, equity, and inclusion work, as you mentioned. Uh, but I have such a love, right, for my people. I keep saying that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And one of the groups of people I yearn to share with are particularly women,
Hmm.
particularly women of color, and our young women, right?
Yeah.
Those that are developing, so you can learn from our, not mistakes, but
But our
just
lives.
but our lives, right?
Mhm.
We are different generations. There is so much that I know that if I was willing and listening and someone was sharing it with me, that I know now, if I knew it
Mhm.
then, oh my goodness, how different my life would be, even to the point of owning my own business. Listen, I'm the new Colonel Sanders, right? I'm doing the thing after 55.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And so it takes kind of all of that, plus
Mhm.
some that we didn't talk about today, to be in a space to have the courage to start a business really as a CEO of the business, not a big B business that you can leave behind as a legacy,
Yeah.
to start that at this age. And can
Mhm.
I say one more thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Literally, as of yesterday, the day before this recording, my company, after applying for its first grant,
Mhm.
there've been all of these grants for businesses out
Yes.
there these days. My first application, I was selected as one of the 2023 recipients of the Comcast Rise grant.
Whoa. Wow, that's a big deal.
Big deal.
Congratulations. Oh my gosh. That is awesome. I mean, y'all.
It just speaks to the power of focus. And when
Yes.
you determine, and when I tell you, we probably have to have another episode, is when I tell you
Yeah.
that when I focused on my relationship with God
Mhm.
and knowing how God works for real, for myself and not through some other intermediary, no
Mhm.
minister, no nothing, but I went to that word myself,
Mhm.
turned it all around for me.
Oh my gosh, Rochelle. Mm. That I mean, I can't add anything else to that.
Now, because I'm gonna, the tears are gonna start rolling. I am my
Yeah.
mama's child, but nothing. I didn't have the clarity, the vision, the discipline,
Yeah.
the consistency that I have until I got that in order. First things first.
Wow. Wow.
I
Y'all,
do
this is
more. I do
mhm.
more. My body can't do what it used to do, and I do more now.
Wow. That's divine, right?
Yes.
Man, this is why I do this, y'all. So y'all can hear things like this. So we can share the wisdom and so we can maybe limit these experiences like Rochelle was saying when she was having that perimenopause experience and then spoke about it and people were like, "Oh yeah." So that maybe we can help save people from hard lessons and just really kind of let you know you're not alone, let you learn maybe things a little bit earlier than we have in our life and just be an encouragement. And sometimes I look for I think God speaks to me through experiences and everything. Like that's how I hear a lot of validation. I know people do it in different ways, but for me, conversation, like it's just one of those things. And so I really hope this touches your heart. It has blessed my soul so, so much. Man, yeah, you're gonna have to come back. We already gonna have to pick another day because you gotta come back. I mean,
Happy to.
yes, thank you so much again, Rochelle, and congratulations on that grant. That is a
Thank you.
huge deal. I'm so proud for you, of you, all the things, and I know great and things are gonna keep coming your way. I really do.
Thank
This is
you.
why I'm proud to know her, y'all. Man.
And I'm proud to know you. I tell you, from that first episode of Gradually Well, I said, "Oh, okay, that's someone I want to follow." And everybody that I know that can benefit, well, everybody can benefit from it. I shared it with, and I continue to share it with people widely because your transparency is infectious.
Oh, thank you.
Of course, I already can see your beautiful soul from the relationship that we had before.
Mhm.
I know that your platform will reach millions, if not billions, on this planet. And so I'm looking forward to seeing just where it goes. I am so proud to be connected to you
Oh.
and feel so blessed for you popping into my life in 2018.
Oh, thank you so much, Rochelle.
Yes.
You gonna make me emotional. So, y'all, we both on this podcast teary eyes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. All right, y'all. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap us up here. Please let us know your thoughts and everything on this podcast, and you'll have to be on the lookout for when Rochelle comes back. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I had a great time talking with Rochelle. And I just, again, hope it gave you something to think about. Please check out Rochelle's information when you get a chance. It's good stuff. And also rate and review the show. I genuinely want to know your thoughts. So please take the time to share them with me. But I think that's going to be it. Until next episode. Bye.